1960s and Civil Rights. Question 1. Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas was an important court case fought in the United States Supreme Court. Why was the outcome of this case so important to the civil rights movement? A. The Supreme Court said that African American schools could stay open as long as they were equal to white schools. B. The Supreme Court ordered an end to segregation in public schools. C. The Supreme Court voted to allow African Americans the right to sit wherever they wanted to on a public bus. D. African American parents decided to keep their children segregated because they liked the schools in their neighborhoods better than other schools. Question 2. Rosa Parks was an ordinary citizen who took part in the civil rights movement. What role did she play in protesting the way African Americans were treated after World War II? A. While riding a public bus, she refused to move to the back of the bus to allow a white man to have her seat. B. Rosa Parks followed Malcolm X's belief and protested against segregation with him. C. She really didn't think that segregation was a problem in Montgomery, Alabama. D. Martin Luther King encouraged Rosa Parks to protect herself and not protest against segregation. Question 3. By what means did Martin Luther King Jr. encourage people to protest the mistreatment of African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement? A. Martin Luther King encouraged people to write threatening letters to politicians who didn't follow his beliefs. B. Martin Luther King encouraged and helped to organize boycotts, sit-ins, marches, and rallies to speak out against segregation. C. Martin Luther King believed that violence was the only way to solve the problem of segregation. D. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X worked hand in hand to protest segregation. Question 4. What impact did President Kennedy have on the civil rights movement? A. He ordered that African Americans be allowed to vote without paying a poll tax. B. He kept African Americans from being arrested for protesting against segregation. C. He proposed a civil rights bill to Congress which would make segregation in all public places illegal. D. He allowed African Americans to run for public office. Question 5. What happened to the armed forces, military, as a result of the civil rights movement? The Army refused desegregation, but other branches complied with President Truman's new laws. B. President Truman did not allow the armed forces to be desegregated. C. President Truman ordered an end to segregation in the armed forces. D. All 4 branches of the armed forces continued to be segregated because the Civil Rights Act did not apply to the military. Question 6. What were sit-ins? Where African Americans would sit on the buses and refuse to give up their seats to the white riders. B. African Americans sat in white restaurants until served or until it closed to show they deserved to be served just like the whites. C. Sit-ins proved to not be very effective during the civil rights movement. D. African Americans and whites would sit together on buses to prove that segregation on buses was not necessary. Question 7. What was the purpose of freedom rides? A. African Americans sat in white restaurants until served or until it closed. B. African Americans and whites sat together on buses to prove that segregation was not necessary. C. White people would pick up the African Americans walking on the road and give them a ride. D. African Americans were able to ride trains for free while they boycotted the buses. Question 8. What was the outcome of the Civil Rights Act? A. It stated that all segregation in public places was now banned. B. It stated that public places could continue to segregate if they wanted to. C. It stated that all speeches, marches, sit-ins, and boycotts were illegal. D. It stated that African Americans and whites must share schools, but not other public places. Question 9. What did Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and President Kennedy all have in common? A. They were all memorable leaders during the Civil Rights Movement. A. Again. They were all memorable leaders during the Civil Rights Movement. B. They were all assassinated. C. They believed that people should protest nonviolently in order to gain civil rights for all people. D. Both A and B. Question 10. What was the purpose of the Voting Act of 1965? Questions 11 through 14. List 4 things Martin Luther King did to help the civil rights movement. Questions 15 through 20. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X held different philosophies of how to accomplish their goals during the civil rights movement. Compare and contrast Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Malcolm X's philosophies. Please make sure to put 2 responses in each section for a total of 6 responses.